Good morning, King's Chapel. Ooh, wow, that's really hot. Can you turn that down just a little bit? That's really, really hot. Can't you touch the mic without it cracking? Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're going to go to 2 Kings, chapter 5. And we're going to start in 1 through 14. Second Kings 5. I'm assuming all of you on video are turning your Bibles as well. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. Now the Syrians on one of their raids had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. That echo is horrible. I don't know what's causing it. That's bad. My apologies to those on video. Now, the Syrians on one of their raids had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his Lord. Thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman, my servant, that you may cure him of leprosy." And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and to make alive? That this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy. Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me." Verse 8. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me now, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman was angry and went away, saying, "Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, far better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned away and went in a rage. But his servants came to him and said, "My father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? He actually said to you, 'Wash and be clean.'" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Naaman, a man of valor, a man who led a nation through war and into victory. And yet he was also a very sick man. Leprosy wasn't just some rash that you went down to the corner drugstore and got a cream for. It was a death sentence. In the Jewish community, they had laws for this, and which would cause the person with leprosy to be removed from the rest of the community. They would have to go about calling out unclean whenever somebody else was nearby. Yet, this Naaman wasn't a Jew. He was a Syrian. In the book of Luke, Jesus uses Naaman as an example, and that there were many lepers in Israel, but God chose to cleanse one, and it was an Armenian general from Syria named Naaman. Just a little note. Jesus was, after he mentioned this in the synagogue, was then ran out of town with the purpose that they wanted to kill him for bringing up this very fact. And add to that, originally, Naaman refused to do what he was told to do. For him to receive his cleansing, he refused. In his mind, he already had it figured out. He had already painted a picture of how God would heal him through this prophet of God. He'd already put it all together in his head. He knew how this was going to happen. Because it was going to be great. It was going to be grand. But did you catch it? Elisha did not go out to this man named Naaman, but instead sent his servant to tell him, go wash in the Jordan 7 times. Naaman was a man of importance. He was not accustomed to being treated with disrespect. Does this man of God not know who I am? Does he not understand the mighty military man that I am? Does he not realize the price that I'm ready to pay? A price that would equal a king's ransom. Let's go back a little bit. How was it that Naaman even heard about the possibility of being healed at all? A little Israelite girl who was carried off in a military raid and was a servant, a slave, caring for Naaman's wife. That little girl told that wife, if Naaman was to see a prophet in Samaria, this certain prophet, he would be cured of his leprosy. Let's be honest. At this point, most people in this situation would have said, oh, what a mighty imagination you have, little girl. Get back to work. But instead, Naaman loads up. To give you an idea of what he took with him to purchase this healing, 10 talents of silver. That's about 750 pounds of silver. At today's market value, that is about $703,560. 6,000 shekels of gold. That is about 150 pounds of gold. In today's market value, that's $9,792,528. 10 changes of clothes. Now, we're not talking jeans and t-shirts here, okay? This was fine clothing, intended for royalty or nobility. And it's estimated to have been worth at least a minimum of $5,000. That puts the grand total of these things over $10,500,000 that Naaman loaded up on chariots and whatever else and hauled with him. However, if you then take in consideration the basis of what a daily wage was worth then and a daily wage is worth now, The purchasing power in that time puts the value actually between $50 and $100 million. Naaman loads up $50 to $100 million worth of riches to take with him in order to bless this man of God for his healing. I'm not sure about you, but it seems like Naaman was willing to do whatever it took to have this disease taken off of himself. Elisha could have basically named his price and got whatever he wanted out of the deal. I guess it's also worth mentioning that Naaman traveled by chariot with his entourage, and we have no clue how big this group was. You can imagine a military man probably did not go by himself with just a couple people, right? This guy, being of importance as he was, probably had quite the crew with him. Not just a couple servants, not just, a cook and, a butler. He probably had quite a few people with him. But we don't really know. What we do know is that he went about 100 miles in this journey. Let's be honest. Naaman had some real time in that 100 miles on a chariot to think about what was going to be done. I'll walk up to this prophet. He'll see me as the mighty military man I am. Incredible, strong, powerful, respected. He'll wave his arms over me. He'll say some elaborate words to his God. Heaven will move, earth will shake. Great signs, wonders will occur. And everybody will wow who's within sight. Nope. Elisha sends out the servant, go wash yourself in the Jordan 7 times. Not quite what Naaman had imagined, huh? The Jordan River was a very fast-moving river, and it was known to be continually muddy. It was not a clear, pristine piece of water. It was up. It also made it very fertile, though, for all the valleys around it. Because that mud carried a lot of fertilizer with it. It also flowed through a very thick and wild jungle-like valley, which made it look very dirty and unimpressive. Especially compared to those rivers that Naaman was accustomed to in Damascus. Rivers that were known for being clean, pleasant, and beautiful. And he went away in a rage. A rage! Naaman didn't do what the servant of God told him, or the servant of the man of God said to do. Instead, because it did not meet his expectations, Naaman had put together in his own mind, he was mad. He felt dishonored. He felt belittled. He felt, he was angry. Then very bravely, servants of Naaman speak so boldly to this warrior who just happened to be angry. Now, typically, if you've got a warrior who is angry, the last thing you really want to do is just talk to them, especially talk sense to them, right? It usually just doesn't come together very well. It is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? he actually said to you, wash and be clean. Let's look at this again. He goes to the king, his king, and gets him to write a letter to the king of Israel, which almost starts an international incident, right? He then travels 100 miles in a chariot. Note, chariots don't have any suspension. It's a rough ride. They have no air conditioning. And the first thing you see looking forward and probably smell is the backside of the horse. That travels about 3 miles an hour, and maybe for short periods of time could make 10 miles an hour. It would take at least 3 days of consistent travel to make that 100-mile journey. He takes millions of dollars worth of things, weighing about a half a ton, plus multiple chariots, servants, horses, and whatever else they needed for the journey. But he also had a bucket full of expectations that he had put together all along the way, and a barrel full of pride, arrogance, and entitlement. Stupid old Naaman, how dumb can you be? Not to just do what you're told. Was he really that much different than any of us? I mean, yeah, okay, so we probably are not going to have the president write us a letter so we can go to another nation and get our healing, right? And we probably don't, really have the millions of dollars worth of goods to load up in our chariots to take with us to get our healing or our miracle. But are we really any that much different than Naaman is? As we build the plan in our minds of how God must do it, what it must look like, how it must be. There are those who will go from church to church, conference to conference, run to and fro. They will seek out professionals and not so professionals. They will do all the hard things. They'll climb a mountain, they'll cross a flooded river, they'll battle 100 rattlesnakes and 5 copperheads, and they'll hold fire in their hand. They'll absolutely do the hard things, the costly things, all the while demanding how that healing, our loved ones' healing, our friends' healing, be it spiritual, mental, or physical. And maybe it's not a healing at all, maybe it's a situation. But how it has to look like, what it must contain, how it must go down. See, complicated answers and hard answers allow us to remain in control because we decided what it had to look like. In the meantime, God often requires simple obedience because it requires surrender. Real surrender. See, I can see Naaman going back to his chariot when Elisha's servant tells him to go to the Jordan wash, kicking the sand, throwing out some curse words. I won't do that one. Yelling, shaking his fists in the air. When his servants step up and say, aren't you going to do what he said? As I read this passage, I think it has been really simplified from the actual event. I think there's some real pieces of this that are just left out. Maybe for the sake of the parchment. We don't want to use up too much parchment. We'll just kind of condense this a little bit. Because you know what? I've known people that are a lot less powerful, a lot less important than Naaman, who have been angry. You can't convince them of anything. You can't convince them to do the right thing, especially if they're angry. That is, if they're ever convinced at all. So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. I'm sorry, these servants probably just went, whew. He listened to us and the servant, instead of killing us. Can I tell you that in doing that, 7 times in that old muddy river was like 7 times of dying and being buried, only to come up to reveal real new life. See, I see it something like this. Down into that muddy water, and his pride dies, and he's brought up with life and humility. Down he goes to wash a second time in that muddy current, and his entitlement dies, and he's brought up to life with gratitude. Down below that thick muddy waters, and his offendedness dies, and he's brought up to a life of thankfulness. Down he goes a 4th time, and his prejudice dies, and he's brought up to life with objectivity. Down into that fast-moving current, and his hot temper dies, and he's brought up to life with peace. Down again into the mud and muck of that old Jordan River, and his arrogance dies, and he's brought up to life with respect and love for others. Down for the 7th time, and his leprosy dies, and he's brought up to life with flesh restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. 2 Kings 5:15-19. Then he returned to the man of God, he and all of his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. So accept now a present from your servant. But he said, As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Then Naaman said, If not, please let there be given to your servant 2 mule loads of earth. For from now on your servant will not offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god but the Lord. In this matter may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter. He said to him, Go in peace. Naaman was a changed man. He stood before Elisha and declared that there is no God but the God of Israel. He has encountered God and fully recognized Him alone. Elisha refuses, even when urged again, meaning the gift of God is free and clear. So Naaman asks for 2 loads of dirt from Israel. This was a real thing in this time, as gods were thought to only be found in a geographical area. That you could only find them in a certain place. So if you wanted to worship a god from another place, you would take dirt from there and then have it placed on your location as a place to worship that God. Naaman was wanting to take this dirt in order to build an altar, a place to worship, to create a place of holy ground. He truly desired to do whatever it would take to worship the God of Israel. He then faced a problem that he knew was ahead. The king of Syria, in which Naaman served under, required him to go with the king to the temple of Rimmon. Rimmon was the god of storms, or the storm god. There, Naaman must hold the king's arm as the king bows, meaning that Naaman must also bow with him. This workplace requirement and loyalty requirement is a very real issue here. But Naaman's heart is that of a worshiper of God of Israel alone. Elisha simply says, "Go in peace." Naaman is a brand new believer. He wants to get it all right. He was willing to do all the hard things. He found it hard to do the humble things. But now he is all in. Yet Elisha recognizes and aims to grow Naaman's faith and not weigh him down with piles of rules, regulations, and traditions. But instead he sees a fragile new faith that is sincere and true. A heart that was changed. A man changed inside and out. And I don't know how many lepers we have walking around Harlan County. But I know there's a mighty number of people who need healings. But I wonder, who will be the little servant girl? The little girl who was hauled away from her home and her family to put into slavery. Who would then actually say something that another might be healed and saved. I wonder who will be the servant of the man of God that will deliver the message plain and straight even when it angers the one standing before them, taking them all the way into a rage. I wonder who will be bold enough to speak sense in the middle of offense to the one who needs that healing, even if it's not what they want to hear. I wonder who it will be that will turn away riches of what is offered to them in order to have the reward of heaven. I wonder who it is that we might not just see physically healed, but completely changed inside and out. Who finally humbles themselves to enter not once, not twice, but 7 times into what seems to be some nasty, dirty river. But it's actually just simple obedience and ultimately freedom. Who releases their idea of control in their situation for God's situation of simplicity that comes through that humble obedience. Not an obedience of tradition and piles of rules and regulations, but through relationship with the true God, the great I am, whose burden is light. Who are you in this story? Might you be that little slave girl? Lonely, taken away from her family? Might you be that servant that Elisha sends out the door and says, "Hey, go tell this guy this. We got time to bother with him. He's just some old hothead that thinks he's over important. Could you be the servant of a hothead who goes, sir? Didn't he say, go be clean? In the midst of that guy's rage? Who are you in the story? Because see, any one of those roles is roles that God will use. If it's not our plan, but it's His. Are you the king who ripped his clothes and was all concerned and worried that this other king was going to take out his wrath when his servant wasn't healed? Who are you? Are you the one who has humbled themselves and is just trying to be obedient? Not with all the rules, regulations, and traditions that like to be piled upon us, but with the love, humility that the Lord has provided. For you on the camera out there in the world, let me leave you with this, Romans 15. May the God of hope fill you with all joy, peace, and believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. May the God of peace be with you all. Amen.